This is a video that I never ever in a million years wanted to do, but at this point, almost 3 years on, I feel like it's something that I need to do, not just for myself but for other women that this might happen to at the hands of this man. In the middle of May 2022, we went to a private endometriosis surgeon for a consultation because my endometriosis was so bad that I was bedbound. We had a 10-minute consultation that cost £400, and he confirmed that I had adenomyosis and endometriosis. Put me in for a hysterectomy within, was it 10 days?
It was in about 10 days. It was 10 days. It was a Wednesday and then the surgery was next Saturday after a 10-minute consultation.
It was very, very soon and not very long to get used to the fact that I had to have a hysterectomy. Anyway, anything to get out of my pain, and I was just so grateful that someone would actually do the surgery and get me out of this pain. So obviously I agreed and we went for surgery 10 days later.
What happened after that can only be described as a nightmare, really, can't it? In every way, shape and form. I think we should have had the warning signs at the very beginning. First thing the surgeon said before he'd really introduced himself or anything was, "Did you see my documentary on television?" Was the first thing he said. Now, at this time, to me, this was like a godsend in a way. It was like, oh wow, we've got this top level person. He's basically famous in the endometriosis community and he's going to save Catherine. The consultation that we paid about £400 for, wasn't it? It was all of about 12 minutes. In that time he decided Catherine needed her womb removing.
I had my surgery on the 28th of May 2022.
It's worth noting as well that on that day everything seemed incredibly stressed and harried and rushed, and we found out he was doing 4 surgeries in the same day.
Yeah.
Your surgery was pushed back really late. It felt terribly rushed.
Yeah. Everything
felt rushed. The whole day was a manic stress, which is not what an operation should.
When I come round from the surgery, I struggled to drink.
It's worth noting that Catherine is autistic, and one of the symptoms of her autism, and it has been reported in a lot of autism, is this inability to drink, to stay hydrated. And we expressed this to the surgeon multiple times, and Catherine was severely dehydrated. But
they completely withdrew the fluids, so they didn't give me fluids.
Denied you fluids over and over
denied
again.
Me the fluids.
Begging for fluids, they were just telling you to drink and
after
drink.
Such major surgery, and at this point I was 6 stone, so I had lost 2 stone. I'm usually 8 stone and I'd gone down to 6 before the surgery, so I was quite unwell.
After I kept requesting fluids for Catherine, the nurses were denying them, simply telling her that she should drink. Just drink, like it's that easy for somebody with autism and who's suffering terribly. And then he still hadn't been to see Catherine, the surgeon.
Oh yeah, that's another thing worth mentioning, is that I never saw him after surgery. He didn't come round and tell me what had happened in the surgery. That I was just discharged. Oh yeah, he did.
He scolded you like a child.
He rang my mobile whilst I was in the hospital, and this must have been about 11 o'clock at night, I think. I don't remember because it's all a blur, but it was within that 12 hours, and he rang my mobile and he said, "Stop making things difficult and drink." And he didn't tell me how the surgery went. He didn't ask me if I was well. It was awful. It felt horrific.
It was really, really awful. It was really demeaning as well. It was like he was angry at you for something you couldn't control. And he also mentioned how he'd stuck his neck out for you.
To get me into the surgery quicker. So he'd added me onto the list to get me done quicker. And I was discharged about 12 hours after my hysterectomy. I didn't feel ready to go. I still felt completely out of it. I didn't know what was going on. I barely remember leaving the hospital. I was discharged without any notes, and what was it, about 2 days later, I couldn't breathe properly. My mum called an ambulance and I had a PE on my lungs, and they...
Pulmonary embolism, for people who don't know, it's a blood clot.
Blood clot on my lungs. And they'd asked me, had I been drinking fluids? I said I couldn't. I had asked for fluids, but I was discharged, and it was very, very difficult for me to drink. And they said that's mainly the reason why people get PEs after such major surgery is dehydration after such big surgery. So it was a contributing factor that he denied me fluids.
Scandalous.
I was in hospital for about 5-6 days.
Straight away back in hospital. Yeah,
straight away.
5-6 days.
So this is now about a week after surgery. I've spent the following week in hospital because of the PE. During this time, they had done several CT scans and x-rays because of the PE, and they had noticed that I've got excess air in my abdomen that was not normal for the surgery that I had, and it should have been gone within the first 2 days. So they were ringing to try and get my notes from this hospital because I was discharged with no notes at all, and that even the hospital struggled, the NHS hospital struggled to get these notes because they just weren't answering any questions.
Whilst we were in the NHS hospital getting treatment for the PE, the private surgeon's main surgical assistant contacted us to let us know that Catherine's histology was back, and it was revealed that her womb did not have adenomyosis, which is the reason it was removed. So essentially, the hysterectomy was completely pointless.
So we've dealt with the PE and we've just had the news that I don't have adenomyosis, so that's, my mental health is rock bottom at this point, and I'm in agony. And this pain that I'm getting is a pain that I've never had before. So it's at the top of my vagina and it's like someone's stabbing me. Another thing that was going on at this point was the NHS hospital were ringing me daily. There was a specific doctor there that was ringing me daily and making me come in for an x-ray every few days to make sure that the air had gone. This air was not going and it was out of proportion. They said that the main 2 reasons for excess air in the abdomen that's that significant is a foreign body or a nip in the bowel. Yeah. So this went on it actually went on for months, but it went on till the next thing happened. And the next thing that happened was around 2 weeks after surgery, I started bleeding.
Profusely.
Yeah, and it just got worse and worse over about 3 weeks, until I was admitted to an NHS hospital.
Another NHS hospital.
In this time, 2 weeks later, we'd let the private surgeon know that I was bleeding, and we were asking why could this be. And at this point, we got a letter from his secretary and it read, "You are now discharged."
On the surgery, one of the main area of Catherine's pain was the left side, her left ovary, and multiple scans had revealed that you had a large endometrioma on your left ovary. And then we found out that he hadn't removed that endometrioma.
What I'd done, we'd had photos of the surgery and I pointed out the endometrioma on the ovary and I said, why was this not removed? Because that looks like the endometrioma to me. And he said, it is not an endometrioma. And several emails from his secretary state, this is not. And he capitalised the not an endometrioma. It was clear that it was because it was on the MRI and I pointed out on the photos of the actual surgery. It was obvious for someone who's not a specialist in endometriosis to spot that this was an endometrioma. So I don't know how a specialist would not know that. So I was admitted to this NHS specialist centre and they did several scans. They did an internal ultrasound where they found a nodule at the top of my vagina that they thought was endometriosis, but they couldn't say what it was, so they arranged for an emergency surgery because alongside the bleeding and this nodule, they believed that something was wrong. So
I don't think we've really stressed the bleeding as what was happening at all.
The bleeding was scary. I thought I was going to die. It was that horrific. I was passing blood clots the size of my hand. And I was absolutely terrified to move. I didn't want to go to the toilet. Like every time I went to the toilet, I'd cry and I'd ask if someone could come with me. It was horrific.
They were huge.
And we will put images up. I'll put images up now of what I was passing. So if you're squeamish, please look away.
And were getting bigger and bigger, these blood clots as well, basically by the hour.
Yeah, they were just getting bigger and bigger, and I was getting more and more terrified. And they did then say, we're going to bring you down, about to go down half an hour, and they make you do a urine sample. And as I was doing this urine sample, this tube just fell into a pot.
This is the nightmare, the mystery that haunts us to this day. This was the tube. There we go. That's it. So
to this day, we still don't know what this tube is, and there's been an investigation at the actual hospital, and the closest that they can come up with is that it's something to do with IVF. I've never had IVF. I've never had another operation. And this tube was also tested, and it's radio opaque, which means that it shows up on scans.
Nowhere else on earth that tube could have came from. She's had one surgery in her life. 6 weeks before that came out of her, she had a million problems, excessive bleeding, and the second that tube came out, all those massive blood clots
completely
stopped, and they paused the surgery that day.
They paused the surgery because I passed that, and they said, we think this was the problem. So the surgery was stopped, and they did actually decide to go in a week later to check that there was no plastic left over. But going back to the tube is radio opaque, and I had had an MRI, I'd had about 4 CT scans, and I'd had around 10 x-rays, really excessive amount because of the air and the blood clot on my lung. It is on one of those scans, and that is one of the reasons why I'm doing this video, is because no one has actually looked in detail at any of those scans to find that plastic on the scans, and that's why I'm doing this video. Is I want to find a radiographer who can help to identify the tube on the scans. The
closest thing we got to that being revealed in any way, shape or form was when you were bleeding excessively and you're having them blood clots, and they did that vaginal ultrasound and you were screaming in pain.
And they saw something at the top and they didn't know what it was.
A nodule, they reported it as.
We do have the scans and no one's ever looked at them, and because my health it's declined ever since the surgery, we have not had the time or energy to even go into this, other than we opened up 2 cases. Both solicitors
are excited to take this case on, especially in relation to
they said that there's no way that that he can get away with this, and it's in black and white and everything's so straightforward. As soon as they got the independent gynecology review, the gynecologist had sided with him and had said that to have a hysterectomy for adenomyosis is the surgeon's discretion. So we understand to a certain extent that someone can say you may have adenomyosis and it may help. He didn't say that. Endometriosis is again the surgeon's discretion, which I understand that totally, because endometriosis is such a complex disease that you don't know if you've got it all. You will never know if you've got it all. So I understand that, but this endometrioma was on an MRI, and I saw the endometrioma, and the surgeon that went in second saw the endometrioma. Why an endometriosis specialist that I've paid £12,000 to didn't spot that? I can't understand, other than he was rushed.
I think he was rushed. I think he was definitely rushed.
Or he didn't know what he was looking at. I've also since spoken to several girls, and I'm still in contact with them, that have had surgery with this man and had similar problems, like excruciating pain after surgery, lost use of their bladder or bowel. Back to the review, the independent review, the only other thing was the fact that he left plastic inside of me, and the result of that was he said he didn't leave any plastic inside of you, therefore I believe him. But if he is found to be lying, then that's a very serious matter. Well, he is lying. But the insurance companies have both said that it would cost them more to prove that he left the plastic inside of me than it would money that they would get. So if there's any freelance solicitors, radiographers, or even gynecologists that think that they can help us with this case and locate that plastic on the scans, We would be so grateful for your help and support.
Not only grateful, we decided that it's not about money, it was never about compensation. It was about the ordeal that this man put Catherine through.
And wanting him to never ever be able to do this to another woman.
Torture another person in this way. We wouldn't want any compensation.
We would waiver our compensation completely, and it could go to the solicitor, the radiographer, the gynecologist, whoever is willing to help. We will offer our fee.
That tube came from that operation. That plastic came from that surgery. There's no doubt in that. We have the medical records that prove the operation was stopped, the second operation, because that tube left Catherine's body. There's no other explanation. Catherine's had multiple scans before you pass that tube. So somebody out there should be able to look at that information. We've had nobody examine it thoroughly and just to see where that tube was inside of her body.
So that is a really short version of an absolute nightmare.
There's a lot more.
There's so much
not
more.
Worth exhausting
so much more that it would take.
Just about this man's
weeks.
General etiquette, there's a lot more to it. It was really cruel at times, incredibly cruel.
It was horrific. My mental health severely declined. I went down to 5 stone. I have struggled to eat. I've had numerous problems with my bowel and my bladder since. I've got to have another surgery. I obviously had to go in for the emergency surgery. It has been horrific, not to mention that I unnecessarily had my womb removed. It has just been horrific, and I've not been able to talk about it until now. And I just want to put this out there because I want to, one, make sure it never ever happens to anyone else, because I almost didn't make it. It was so bad that there were times when I couldn't see the next hour, let alone the next day.
It was hell on earth.
It was hell.
It was hell on earth, darling, wasn't it? It's been a brutal few years. I would never wish it on anybody.
Yeah, if he held his hands up and he said, "I'm so sorry, I made a mistake there," and then I would have forgiven that. But it's the fact that he discharged me at my most vulnerable state. Not only that, he's asked for a further £2,000, something like that.
14 grand to destroy your life.
To destroy my life. I've paid him to destroy my life.
I've done a good job of destroying your life, so give me some money, please.
Somebody knows what that is, and somebody can find that on a scan. I'm sure of it.
It came from the surgeon's operating table.
For my own peace of mind, I want to know what he used inside of this. We have until, is it the 28th of May?
It's about that time.
To pursue another case against him. And
it's a foreign body was left inside you, and they basically just said, wasn't us, and that's all it's took. No further action. When this first happened, everybody was like, oh, well, that's it, that's all it takes. But it hasn't been all it's took. All they have to do is cover up their own tracks, deny that they used that.
And that's it, they get away with it.
Meanwhile,
that is the video in short of the absolutely horrific last 3 years.
Horrific. I think at some point we'll probably do a longer one, because I actually think whilst we've been recording this, I'm getting a little bit frustrated, because I'm like, this is not going to the depths of the depravity of this situation, especially in relation to this man's character and who he is, and it's quite frightening. And like you said, Catherine has spoke to multiple women who have expressed very similar things. I think he's dangerous. I truly think he's dangerous, and he's very manipulative, and he's got women's lives in his hands. And he doesn't have to kill them explicitly, but he's killed Catherine in many ways, over and over again.
So one more time, if you are a solicitor or a radiographer, even a gynecologist may be able to help.
Someone who's willing to go that little bit further with this.
That can look into this case for us. We have every single bit of evidence. Evidence is in there. It's just finding it, and we are happy to offer the entire compensation to anyone that can help us solve this and bring justice to not only me but other women that are suffering at the hands of him. If you can like, share, save anything you can with this video, and we've tried to keep it as short as we can. We understand it's not containing every single last bit of information.
It'd be about 3 hours.
Couldn't, and we wanted to make it as short as possible with as much information as we could in it. So if you could share this with anyone you think is relevant, share it on your story, your page, anything, we'd be so grateful.
Unnecessary hysterectomy, clear endometriosis left behind, terrible neglect of a patient afterwards, and 100% of foreign body left inside of it that caused excruciating pain and massive blood clots.
Thank you for watching. We know it's a much longer than usual video, but it had to be for this type of thing, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time and haven't had the mental or physical capacity to do.
We need a definite conclusion to this
story.
story.
That is the fact of the matter is we need a conclusion. We need to know what that was, and we need justice so that no one else suffers like this.